For those of you who are a part of our church, you have already received or will soon receive a stewardship letter that I've written about encouraging and inviting you to give financially to support the ministry of Brewster Baptist Church in the coming year, in 2023. The idea of writing stewardship letters is a very old one. In fact, in Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, in chapters 8 and 9, in their entirety, they're basically a stewardship appeal. They're a stewardship letter inviting the Corinthians to be part of an offering to help with the ministry to the saints. I encourage you to read 2 Corinthians if you want to, all of chapters 8 and 9 to see it in its totality. Or if you just want to focus on verses 1 through 7 in chapter 8, that will also show you the beginning of it. I want to highlight verse 2 of chapter 8 where Paul writes, "For during a severe ordeal of affliction, their abundant joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part." Now, I know many of you and many of us in the current time in which we are living, we think we're living in challenging times. Inflation's high. Our income may not be keeping up with the increase of the price of food and oil and gas, and frankly, how we're also being gouged by some of these larger corporations. But we're not really in a severe ordeal of affliction, and many of us are not in extreme poverty. But the people Paul is talking about in the churches of Macedonia are, in fact, in a very challenging period. And in spite of that, they're not looking at their situation and saying, well, we can't give like we want to give, or we can't give like we used to give. Paul says, let me continue in verse 3, "For as I can testify, they voluntarily gave according to their means and even beyond their means, begging us earnestly for the privilege of sharing in this ministry to the saints." I wonder how often we think of the opportunity we have to give to God, first of all, as a privilege, and how often do we beg for the opportunity to be included in what we give as an offering to help with the Lord's work at BBC and through BBC beyond to our region and around the country and around the world. And yet that's the attitude that Paul is writing about. It's an encouragement to be generous. And we have the example of these poor Christians going through a difficult trial who still feel so passionately and so strongly about what God is doing and wanting to help their fellow believers and wanting God's kingdom work to expand, that they're going to give not only at the level of their means or according to their means, but even beyond. They're giving sacrificially. And these early Christians, I find still very inspiring for my own giving, and I hope you do as well. I encourage you in all of your life to live generously.